Welcome, fans, to Culturosity, where we take the time to explore the careers of talented creators from around the world. Brought to you by Geekality.com, your source to all things geek. Our guest on the show today is legendary creator and one of the founding fathers of Image Comics, Todd McFarlane. And joining me, as always, is Weapon X reject, Ed Poole.
And we are on
Culturosity
with the legendary Todd McFarlane. I must say, you have a really chipper voice. I was expecting someone kind of really dark, like the butler in the Munster TV show.
No, mine's more of Homer Simpson meets Rocky Balboa. It's a bit of a mumble, indigenous to no place. So it's not. I'm from Canada, but people don't talk like I do. I got a lazy mumble.
A lazy mumble. Again, it's an honor. Your work is very influential to not only my family, who I have two brothers who want to draw, and they grew up aping your style. And for myself, growing up with Image being the big company when I was around 9 years old, it's really, really a big thing for me to be able to interview you.
Well, we appreciate you still hanging around after all these years. So I know I've been around for the 20 plus years at Image, so we don't necessarily expect all of the original fans to. So it's nice to meet guys that have been there as long as we have. Cool.
Nice. Yeah, I actually have Ed in here too. Ed Poole, he's a huge fan as well.
Hey, Todd.
Pardon me?
No, Ed. He's my collaborator on the podcast. He's just sitting there in silence in awe of you. I'm just trying to
I don't even know what to say.
So, also, the interviews don't go very well if the people don't ask you the questions because they're dumbfounded. So you got to at least throw something like, who do you think is going to win the World Series or something?
Since you brought it up. What team do you follow?
Well, I live in the Phoenix area right now, and so obviously I'm sort of one of those guys that root as a Canadian who didn't grow up by a baseball franchise. My attitude is you root for the team that you live closest to. So I'm a Diamondback fan right now. And where my brothers who are about my age, they both picked teams when we were kids up in Canada. And they never budged from them, no matter where they moved. Where to me, I became a little more flexible and went, hey, I live in this city, I'm rooting for those teams. I'm moving to another city, I'm rooting for that team. So I'm not one of those guys that goes, no, I've been a lifelong, Red Sox fan. I just like to support the local business.
Nice.
That's nice. I like that. I like the support, but the Diamondbacks, wow. I'm a Yankee fan. I still remember the beating that Chris Schilling and Randy Johnson gave us in the World Series.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to be at that Game 7, so it was quite a thrill. I know that the storybook ending would have been the Yankees winning because that was the 9/11 year, right? That was 2001. But it just sometimes sport doesn't work out that way, and made a bunch of people here in the desert very, very happy.
Yeah, sometimes talent trumps destiny, right?
Yeah.
So let's get things going. I've been looking at your art book, The Art of Todd McFarlane, The Devil's in the Details. And first off, let's start with, so how did you get Stan Lee to do the forward for you? Did it take a lot of coaxing to get him to do that?
No, Stan and I have known each other for a long, long time. Probably around the time I took over the Spider-Man books, he was still a big, obviously a big figurehead over at Marvel, and so I ran into him from time to time. I mean, obviously, before that I saw him at conventions and, knew he was that famous guy that co-created a bunch of characters. But we became, sort of fast friends years ago, and as we've gotten older in a weird way, we've just become that much closer. So a lot, we do a lot of functions together. So at that point, it was like, hey, Stan, is there any way I can get you to write something? And I always expect people to write maybe a paragraph or something like that, but he actually wrote sort of more kind words than I was expecting. So he's a good man, got lots of enthusiasm. I don't know if you've been able to be around him, but for a gentleman that's almost 90 years old now, he's got way more energy than people half his age by far.
That's like a superpower, I guess. You can't stop
Yeah,
him, right?
to some degree, not only the energy level, but there's a lot to be learned from Stan on how you interact with fans too. That because like I said, I've been around him a fair amount. He makes everybody that he sort of comes in contact with feel like they're just as important as anybody else. So there's doing your job, and there's being good at your job, and then there's getting sort of recognition for it, or at least getting the consumers to buy your products. And then there's when you're in front of the public, actually being cordial to them. I can't say that every creative person I've met has the greatest demeanor, and Stan Lee is, after all these years, is still near the top of being able to smile and shake hands and make you feel welcome.
Yeah, he sounds like a blast. I can never get near him. I've been I'm in New York, so I go to the New York Comic Con, and there's just a sea of people wherever he's at.
Yeah. He's really like the comic pope now, right? Wherever, we should put him in a little glass thing and drive him around and stuff, and he can just wave. But and it'd be a sad day when he's no longer on the earth with us, because you just go, who's going to take his spot? There isn't anybody. There isn't a next in line for him, right? I mean, he's sort of a one of a kind, and we're down. We're going to be down after he leaves us. I hope he lasts for another 20 years.
A living legend.
Yeah, they should put a statue of Stan outside of the Marvel building just because.
It's true.
Yeah. So I'm looking at your art book, and I have to ask, because I think it takes courage to show your older work. And I know a lot of people that I've interviewed don't like to show their older work because they're embarrassed of the kind of flaws they had early on.
Yep.
Did you worry about that?
No, and here's why. Because and again, I understand it. Neurotic artists. I'm one of them. I understand sort of our sort of blessing and curse that we have there. I look at every drawing as just sort of a snapshot, like somebody took a picture, and that those drawings were as good as I was at that moment. That was it. That was all the talent and skill I had at that particular moment. So I'm not embarrassed that at a time when I had maybe only devoted 100, 200 hours to drawing, that I was only that good, which is different than fast forward in the future and you've now done 50,000 hours, and so of course you're going to be better. I mean, it seems a little bit silly that us neurotic artists at times want to go, well, it doesn't look like what I'm doing now. Yeah, but you're only one day on the job then, and now you're 20 years into the job. Of course you're going to be better 20 years later, right? I mean, so it's sort of silly. But for me, I wanted to actually show it for a different purpose, and the purpose was to actually encourage people who may have aspirations to break into comic books that you don't have to be fully formed in your art style or your skill set when you get in the door. And I think, in a weird way, I'm sort of a prime example. If you look at my early artwork, it's very mediocre at best. It's below average for sure. And people shouldn't be thinking about the Todd McFarlane who had then years under his belt and honed his abilities. They should be going, how good was he when he actually got the job, when somebody said, yeah, we'll start paying you. And those pages are the ones that should inspire them, not the ones that, okay, now here's Todd, 100 pages later, here's Todd, the 10-year vet. Yeah, I'm pretty good 10 years later, but to me it's sort of the pages when I broke in as an, I went from an amateur to a quote-unquote professional, but the skill was about the same, and it wasn't very good. And to me, that should be the moment that people go, wow, if Todd can be that mediocre at that point and get a job and then eventually turn into this other artist that had a pretty good career, then maybe I can do it. I'm a kid living on the East Coast, and maybe I'm not the greatest, but I'm at least mediocre like Todd, and so maybe there's a chance for me. And the answer is yes, there is, because we don't know anybody out there that gets their foot in the door might not learn skills like I was, or people teach them skills like I was taught, and get way better at it. And all of a sudden you go, wow, who'd have thunk that person, whether it's sports or whether it's in Hollywood or whether it's a musician or in this case, comic books and artwork, that who would have thought, at the beginning of their career that they would have had the success they had. It's all an unknown when you first get into it.
Yeah, I actually, one of the big things for me there is, I love it when I read about authors that tell you how many times they were rejected and how many submissions they sent out. So you're saying that you sent 700 submissions out and you got about 300 rejections, and you actually put the envelopes up there from the companies? That's wow.
Yeah, I think we put a couple in there, but I used to carry the bag of rejections around the conventions. Like I said, when people would come, they go, I sent my samples off, and and a couple people haven't answered me, and then one guy said no, and I used to keep them in like a grocery bag, brown paper bag, grocery bag, and then I'd dump them on the table, and I'd go, you know what that is? And there'd be this pile of mail, and they go, no, and I go, every one of those says, stop, Todd, don't do it, you're not good enough, every one of them. So at some point, if you're going to break into almost any occupation where there's going to be, a little bit of notoriety, you got to get thick skin. If you can't take no for an answer, then there's a lot of occupations that you shouldn't be trying out for. So I wouldn't recommend that you become an actor, because you're probably not going to get the starring role in that $100 million movie on your first crack. You're going to have to go to a lot of auditions, and you're going to have to get rejected a lot of times before you get that first part in that bad, off Broadway play, and then you're going to have to then figure out whether you have the skill and the talent and determination to then move your career any further than that first moment. But there's two big hurdles. The first one is just getting in. You got to get into the game. And so for me, it's like, okay, you want me to draw what book? I don't care. I'll draw any book you want me to draw. And then at that point, now it's all on me to basically go, can I get better, and can I show them that I can meet deadlines, and can I basically make sure that I'm not a pain in their ass, and then maybe they'll give me another job tomorrow, and I can then, pole vault into maybe better jobs. And for comic books, the better jobs were better selling books, which usually had more popular characters.
Yeah, I'm glad you're saying that, because anyone who's listening to this that wants to break in, that's important to remember. I've interviewed very talented independent creators that are trying to break in, and one of them has this beautiful style where it seems like watercolor paintings. It's very ethereal, and he actually broke into the door at Marvel, and they put him on a book, and he said, you know what, I can't work on this. I don't like the way that writer tells his story. And you can't be with somebody else, and he hasn't been able to break in since.
No, and again, we all have to know our limitations and or ourselves personally. I don't usually try to teach people how to draw better too much, because again, and I think I can. I think you give me 8 hours of your life every day for the next year, I'll make you a very functional artist. But the pieces that I usually concentrate on with the artists I hang around with are storytelling, because I think there are rules that are applicable to storytelling that you can teach in our business. But let me just sort of back up on what you said there. That the comic book artist is sort of it's a bit of an odd skill. And the reason I say that is because you have to know how to be kind of good at everything, right? So if they say draw monsters, you got to be good at monsters. And they say draw women, you got to be able to draw women. Draw bushes and buildings and airplanes. You got to be able to draw that. Taxi cabs, explosions, debris, ray gun blast. You have to be able to do kind of a little bit of everything and have the skill at it. So it can be a little bit of an overwhelming thought to go, I need to have all of that visually in my head, and I got to be somewhat decent at it so that people will believe everything I draw is actually, part of the real world. But short of that, for people who are listening, who have any aspirations to get into any art field. There are plenty of occupations, and I would put things like video games and TV shows and movies in that category in a big way, in which it takes a giant collection of people to pull off the final product, right? When I was doing comic books, I was writing, penciling, at the end of my career at Marvel, I was writing, penciling, and inking the book. So I was doing the bulk of the work, just one individual. But when you go into Hollywood or you go into video games, there are people who are in divisions. You know, let's take video games, I've worked on those. That I direct people who all they do is costumes, and then I go to another division and all they do is lighting, and somebody else does male and female bodies, and somebody else does monsters, and then there's another division that does spell casting. That's all they do. They can't draw. They don't know how to design costumes, but they can do magic spells. And then somebody else actually does sound effects in another division, and somebody else, you know, does the cracks and the booms and all that. Somebody does building. Somebody does mountain. And so I could go on and basically tell you that there are literally 50 different things that have to be done by 50 different people to get you the final product, which is your video game and or your movie, which is why there's all those names at the end of every movie. And so the reason I bring that up is for people who are listening, for those of you who might not have an aptitude to be able to do a little bit of everything good, which is what a comic book artist is, then maybe your aptitude is you might just be the best sound effect guy on the planet, and you don't know it yet. They give Academy Awards for the best sound effects in movies, right? So you can have an Academy Award that is the same height, the same weight, the same look. It's the same honor that they give to Brad Pitt and Steven Spielberg. It's the same award. It's called an Academy Award, and they give it to you. So if you're not going to be the actor, the director, the producer of the movie, there are still plenty of occupations that will get you into the business. And so I just say that for people who just think sometimes that want to break into comic books that they have to do all of this. And I go, look, you might actually just be a hell of a colorist. Why don't you just be the best colorist in the business? And don't worry about whether you're going to be an artist, quote-unquote, penciler. Just, you know, maybe you got a niche of being the best letterer in the business. Just find what you're good at, hone that ability, get your foot in the door, and then just let it sort of take its own course, and who knows where you'll be in 5 or 10 years.
And you said the intention of your art book was to kind of inspire people that you don't have to be the greatest going in, that you can make it. It's possible you have a strong work ethic.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't the purpose of the whole book. I think there's by showing it sort of, you know, beginning, middle, and end of the last 20 years, I'm hoping for people who are looking for some inspiration should be at the beginning of the book, not at the end of the book. You know, going, wow, look at it. Like I said, it thought to be that bad. The purpose of the book, on its sort of simple level, was to just go, you know, I've been at it for 20 years. I didn't want to do a straight art book, and didn't want to do an autobiography. And you know, I didn't have the time necessarily to do a tutorial on all this stuff. So we just sort of came up with a version that kind of put all of those three together. What if we put a lot of artwork over chronologically over time? Let me talk about where I was in my life at that, you know, during that span of 20 years. And then in some places, let me just sort of say what I was thinking creatively and how I problem solved through some of these pages during some of those sort of pages I have to do over those 20 years. So it may be, at the end of the day, I don't know, it may be a mishmash. People might not be satisfied because it may be trying to do too much in one book. But I just thought a straight art book would be, I don't know, I bought straight art books and there's not enough writing in it. And after a certain point I go, what? I don't really get any insight into the artwork. I get lots of pretty pictures, so I just wanted to bring a little bit of insight into it.
Well, yeah, you can already have the comics at home, so the insight makes a big difference than just seeing the pictures.
Yeah, to some degree. Again, it's everything. I mean, other than seeing some of the stuff in black and white and some of the sketches, you know, you're right. A lot of the color stuff that's in that book, you may have that particular issue or page at home. So what's new about it? The only thing that would be new is, you know, what were you thinking of, Todd, when you were drawing it? So the information as to how you got to that point might be, interesting. I know when I was trying to break in, I used to gobble up all of those sort of how-to books or anything that anybody said about their career just to see if I could get some nugget that would be of value to me. I didn't need to learn all of what they were capable of doing. I just needed to find 2% from each guy and be able to then apply it to whatever it was I was doing.
That actually took me by surprise. I was looking at it as an art book. I was expecting just a bunch of full-color drawings, splash pages, and things like that. And it took me by surprise how entertaining it was. And the best part for me,
maybe I should have come up with a better name than the Art of Todd. It should have been the art and thinking of Todd, maybe.
Because the best parts for me were how every single page we talked about problem solving. They were throwing these scripts at you. There was a complete Marvel style, which is just long layouts and not a lot of detail of how the panels and the pages need to be broken down. And for you to talk about how you figured that out and gave it that kind of depth and motion to the imagery, I loved that.
Well, it's interesting because 98% of scripts now are what we call full scripts. So the writer sort of breaks down the pages for you and directs stuff. It's an interesting question that I've asked myself, and I don't know what the answer would be, is that if I had started my career 15 years later, when all the writers were doing full scripts, would I have developed the style that I have today? Because the style that I ended up developing was based upon people giving you sort of a rough outline, and it was all on my shoulders to then come up with how the pages would then break down and the flow of the story, where that luxury isn't given to the artist anymore. So it's an interesting question that, again, would I be twice the artist if I started at 15 years later, or would I be a fraction of the artist because I couldn't sort of be able to figure out how to add my influence on the pages. I did a few what we call full scripts. I did a few of them, but I found them to be stifling for me because even though every writer said, "Todd, change whatever you want," and they always say that. They're very gracious, the writers. Once you read a full script, you can't unread it. You can't undo what you just read. And so even if you change it, then your brain's telling you that you know what it was they wanted, but you're intentionally not doing it. And there's a bit of a guilt that goes on at that point, where when I used to get the rough outlines, there was no instructions that went with it. So anything I did, I didn't feel like I was going against the grain of what the writer had originally put down on paper.
I was actually thinking that while I was reading it that for me it seemed like you developed the urge to write because you were basically doing that already. You were forced to because they were giving you such loose scripts. If you'd have been working after the influence of writers like Moore, where everything is just a full script and a lot of detail about the panels, would you have still had that urge to write?
If I had to do full scripts?
Right. If you had just come in after all of this and everyone was giving you full scripts from the beginning of your career, would you have still had that urge to write that you didn't?
Again, it might have been it may have been the thing that tipped me over. I might have gone, I can't stand full scripts, so I got to just write for myself. I got to tell you, never wrote a full script for myself ever. I mean, it's when you write and draw and ink your own stuff, you can take as many shortcuts as you want that get you to the end result, right? So I know when I was penciling and inking for myself, well, I used to show pages to some of my other buddies that were in the business, and they were horrified at times looking at what my quote unquote roughs were. I mean, they were so undefined, if you will, that when I used to send the pages in to the letterer, I used to have to put arrows to it and say, this blob is Peter Parker, this blob is Mary Jane, this blob is J. Jonah Jameson, because they couldn't see it. It was just a blob. And then what would happen is, it was all my shorthand.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
So I knew what I was going to do with it. So then they do the lettering, they send the pages back to me, and then I just go, and I would just draw Peter Parker, right? I mean, I don't need to do a tight version of Peter Parker in pencils, knowing that I'm going to come in and ink it. Oh, and by the way, I don't get any more time. This is the thing that I don't think people understand when you do more than one job. They don't give you any more time. If you do a comic book, if you pencil a comic book, they say, Todd, you have 30 days. Thank you very much. If you say, I want to pencil and ink it, which is basically doing two jobs, they go, fine, you still have 30 days. And if you now say, I want to write and pencil and ink, they go, fine, you still got 30 days. Like, why? Because the book comes out every 30 days. Todd, you can do 10 jobs if we let you. You still only have 30 days. It's why people don't do multiple jobs on the same book that include the art, because the art is already so labor-intensive. They're going, who's the dummy that wants to pencil and ink? And then even if you do, then who's the dummy who wants to pencil and ink and write? I mean, it's like, because you have to cram it all into the same amount of time as somebody who's just penciling at that point. So what does that mean for a guy like me? It meant that I had to come up with shorthand and problem solve, which is some of the things I tried to talk about in the book of how I was able then to accomplish that. I came up with tricks, visual tricks, that allowed me to develop a style, get people to enjoy my artwork, and be able to meet deadlines on a monthly basis. So that's sort of the whole trick. If you can get people to like it and meet deadlines, I mean, that's it. That's the magic trick.
Yeah, that was one of the better quotes in the book, actually, that I remember. But when you say you have to have that balance between style and meeting a deadline.
Right. And because of it, I think I went through a couple pages where, to me, there are pages where I know I was using efficiency in some of the tricks, but to people, my fans, they'll go, "Oh, Todd, you did all this, and I like this, and I like that." But in my mind, I know that I was doing things to get to a deadline, right? So for instance, one of the things I've heard a lot of people say to me, and they're very kind, is they go, "Oh, Todd, you did such great backgrounds and details, and you do cool buildings." And the answer is not really. I mean, I'll take the comment. I never try to talk people out of it. But if you analyze my artwork, you will see that it's not actually true. So what I was very good at, I think, was making people believe that it was true, because they saw enough buildings in between Spider-Man, legs and arms and stuff, that their brain then just filled in the rest of the page because I had a big explosion or a cloud or something in the way. And their brain filled it all in, so I think they gave me way more credit for drawing more buildings than I physically actually ever drew in my career, because they just go, well, there's Spider-Man, he was flying over the city. Yeah, but Spider-Man took up like 80% of that panel. So even at most, by the time I put 10% with balloons, I'm only down to 10%. And yeah, did I fill that with some cool looking buildings? Yeah, but it was only really 10 or 12% of the panel. But your brain told you that if you could peel Spider-Man off that panel, that there was this whole city behind him. Maybe that's true, but Spider-Man took up 80% of it. There is no peeling of him, and it was intentional that he was 80%, so I only had to draw 10% of buildings because I had a deadline that day. So, but again, they want me to be good at buildings. God bless them.
It's good that you're talking about Spider-Man now, because I know Ed is a huge fan of your run of Spider-Man. He actually has a couple of things I'd like to ask you about that.
I was hoping I could get in a Spider-Man question. For better or worse, you're always going to be linked with Spider-Man, and he was such an icon. You altered him a bit. His eyes, his famous webbing, you even co-created Venom. I was wondering, did anybody try to stop you at the time?
Oh yeah, well, yeah, I think I made comment in there in the book. There, yeah. It was an interesting write-up that they gave Dave Michelinie and I the Amazing Spider-Man book, and it was floundering at that time. And they just said, hey, sales on the Spidey books are sort of softening, and he's not a top. I think it was near the top 10. I mean, he should have been number 1, I thought. And he was like, number 9 or 10. And they're going, just guys, come up with something and see what you can do. So, David did his thing, and for me, I go, well, if I just draw it the same way it's been drawn, I go, doesn't make much sense, because they're saying that's not working, and B, it would just bore me. And a lot of times, a lot of what I did was to just entertain myself, because remember, you're in a room by yourself, right? I mean, it's a very lonely occupation. If you're not coming up with ways to keep your mind active, then it can be very tedious, the job you do. So I just sat there and went, okay. I felt in its simplest form that people were drawing Spider-Man emphasis on the word man, and I decided to flip that and make it Spider-Man emphasis on spider. And so when he put on the costume, he went into these crazy poses. Obviously, the webbing you mentioned, came up with a way that, I changed the webbing so that it would actually be, in my mind, functional to shoot towards camera and be able to create volume and depth around the character, which is one of the big tasks that we must do as an artist. We get a flat two-dimensional piece of paper and we have to create the illusion of 3D. Well, if you got a cape or long hair or something, it's easy. But Spider-Man didn't have any of that, so I go, well, he's got the spider webs, and if I use the spider webs as like a rope and, a cowboy with a lasso, then I can create, this volume around him. And then, again, with the big eyes, and then the costume got darker, and I actually even, traditionally there's only like a couple circles on his mask with webbing, and I think I tripled it. I go, no, I'm going to put a bunch of webbings on his costume and multiply it. And it was, again, obviously I was young because I added a lot of this stuff that was very slow to do. I mean, there's no shortcut to doing 5 times as much webbing as anybody else had done. But I just thought that, it kind of looked cool, and I was lucky enough that my definition of cool, sort of worked for other people. And we had a pretty good run on it. Yeah, but to go back to your question, Spider-Man was the icon, and I was messing with the icon, and eventually they sort of got aggravated that I was messing with it, and they sort of wagged their finger at me a few times and said, "Stop it, Todd," and I never did. I always told them I would, right? Again, any children listening, if Mom tells you to clean up the room, even if you aren't going to do it, just say yes, Mom. Always say yes, Mom. Because it ends the conversation. So even if you're not going to clean it up, just say yes, Mom, because it's a short conversation. Don't worry about it. If you say no, then it's going to be a long conversation. So just say yes, Mom, and just go and do what you got to do. So I just used to go, okay, yes, I won't make the eyes big anymore. Yes, I'll get rid of those spider webs. Yes, I'll do it. And I just kept doing it. And eventually, luckily, the sales kept going up, so they begrudgingly had to just go, Todd, but you're selling comic books, and we're in the business of selling comic books. Ding, 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 ding. I told them a couple times, I go, look, dudes, we don't have to be friends. We don't have to go out for barbecue. We don't have to go and share a beer. We don't even have to like each other. You don't have to even like my artwork. All you have to do is acknowledge you are in the comic book business and you hire me to sell comic books. I'm doing that. So why argue about the details of how we got there? The sales are going up. What do you care, right? I mean, why are we having a conversation about how we got there? I'm doing my job. Talk to the people whose sales are going down. But I used to have these odd conversations all the time. So eventually, like I said, it sort of led to me leaving the company.
Yeah, that was my next question. Right before that, it sounded like you wanted to leave, and they gave you your own book, Spider-Man, which you wrote and drew. And I kept you there for a couple more issues. Was it that show of respect, or did you think you would have more freedom that kept you from leaving the first time?
No. I didn't. It wasn't that I was going to leave the first time. It was that I wanted to start writing. So what I was going to do was I was going to leave Amazing Spider-Man, because under no conditions was I going to then do a power play and say either David Michelinie goes or I go. I wasn't going to do that. So I go, I'm off Amazing Spider-Man, and they all had a heart attack, and they went, why? And I go, because I want to write my stuff. And they're going, well, we'll let you write some stuff. And I go, well, not on Amazing Spider-Man, because that's David Michelinie's gig right now. He's the writer. And I go, I am not taking his job. I won't do that to a fellow creator. So I go, what I need to do is I need to quit, and then I just need to find a book that has no creative team on it. So then when I go to that book, I can say, hey, here's the deal. Now I can do a little bit of a power play. You have no creative people, so I'm not bumping anybody. But here's the deal. I'll bring you through the door. I'll bring you Todd McFarlane, the advanced award-winning artist. I'll bring you Todd McFarlane, the pretty good award-winning inker. But in return for that, you have to let this knucklehead who's never written before named Todd McFarlane write the book. And that was the trade-off. And I thought at that point, because my art was going pretty well, that I would be able to find that book fairly easily. Some editor would go, I get Todd's art, all I got to do is let him write some dumb stories, right? So I thought I'd get the gig. So and then before I could sort of walk away from the Spider-Man office, you know, they had already been thinking about doing another book anyways, because at that time there were 3 Spider-Man books, if you recall. There was this Amazing Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man, and Peter Parker Spider-Man. There were 3 books, and so Tom DeFalco comes and says, hey, you know, we've been thinking of doing a 4th book anyways. This is a perfect opportunity. We give you a book so you can write it, and now we've got 4 books. And the reason that made sense to them is that they could have a Spider-Man book every week of the month, right?
Yeah.
So they could have a new book every week, Spidey, and then you just start the 4 books all over again. So I thought it was silly for them to let, you know, a novice writer go on a brand new Spider-Man book, which was me. But I didn't argue too much. I went, you sure? And they went, yeah, we want you to stay on Spider-Man. So I went, yeah, cool. So I stayed on Spider-Man because they eventually let me do some writing, which is where I was at. And again, it wasn't because I thought I had great stories to write or that I was a better writer than anybody. Really, the main motivating factor to want to write the stories was because I wanted to draw. I was being selfish. I wanted to draw the characters that I liked. And when you have a writer on a book, he's always writing the stories of the characters that he likes. Right? So I'm always drawing his favorite characters. And I'm going, hold a sec, I want to draw my favorite characters. So the only way I felt like I was ever going to get there was if I wrote my own story. So I go, hey, no, cool. And so I go, no, I can do a story with the lizard in it the way I want. That's cool. So
yeah, I actually like that you imply that in the book, and your history actually backs that up. That you said you could have any book you wanted that didn't have a creative team on it. Never once did you take a book away from somebody else. I like how respectful you always were to other people and their work. I like that.
Yeah. Well, and part of it maybe was because I knew I'd be able to find a job very, very quickly, right? So, you know, my career was in a solid ground that there was no fear of, you know, if I walk away, then this is the only other gig. And remember, I'm sort of, you know, and some of the guys at Image didn't even quite understand that I'm one of these guys that ended up making a pretty good career in that era and never actually did a mutant book. Everybody just thought that the only way that you could actually make a career, you had to do one of the mutant books because that was sort of where it was all at, right? And again, I become that example of going, no, not really. I always thought that I go, you know, again, selfishly, I go, why would I want to go on the mutant books? Because John Byrne did such a great run, and Paul Smith did a great run, and Jim Lee came on, did a great run. And I go, you know, to me it was already, it'd been defined. And so I was always more concerned with, you know, Iron Man had, you know, there's still cool things you could do with Iron Man. Captain America, nobody's done the definitive Captain America yet, in my mind. Why would you want to do Captain America? And so I always thought it was way more fun to go on characters that were floundering than to jump on characters that already had a huge success, because you could then mess with them and have a little bit more fun. It's exactly what happened with Spider-Man. Although he was a successful character, at the time I came on artistically onto the book with Dave Michelinie, you know, the books were floundering, and so they sort of said, do whatever you guys got to do, you know, just get the sales up. So it was, you know, creatively, you know, liberating, where I'm sure if I jumped on a mutant book, that wouldn't have been necessarily true because they had a huge success, you know, for decades, it seemed like.
Okay, we have to take a quick break. Can you just hold for a moment? And we're back with Tom McFarlane, who's sharing some great stories about his career. Let me just say, I'm looking at your art book right now in a PDF on my computer, my Mac, and I'm looking at an issue of Spider-Man. I think it's issue 12. It looks like a splash page of Wolverine smoking in the background with Wendigo. Smoking in the foreground with Wendigo in the background.
Yep.
For anybody that wants to learn how to draw, specifically ink, just look at that page. It's just gorgeous. It makes me want to learn to draw right now. It's so sick. How long did it take you to do that? All the details.
Again, I mentioned earlier to you that I had tricks that would get you to think that I was doing more than I was. That actually, it's the page I remember, is one of them. If you look at that page, by putting a big Wolverine head into it, I already whacked out like 25% of that page, right? Then you do the smoke, so that takes up 3 or 4%, and then Wendigo, who's in the background, if I recall, he's like in a bunch of bushes, right? So again, doing bushes, nobody's going to tell you that your leaves are wrong. So you can bang out bushes really quickly. So by the time you look, you go, okay, well, I guess there's no feet on Wendigo and there's no legs on Wendigo. You go, so there's not really a lot of Wendigo that's there if you actually look at it. But because there's ink from top to bottom of that page, your eye is tricked that there's a lot of line work, but there's not a lot of Wendigo and there's not a lot of Wolverine. There's enough information in the story for you to go, oh, look, and God bless you for falling for the trick, that it worked there. But like I said, I used to have these ways that would get people to go, wow, but they were actually easy for me to do. Doing debris was easy for me. Doing clouds were easy for me. I think in that book there's also a black and white that was, I think, the cover of a trade of Spider-Man and Venom, where Spider-Man's jumping and Venom's down in some debris and it says no trespassing or something like that, right? Again, it's another page where a lot of people have said some nice compliments to. But if you look at it, there's just like Spidey, and then there's about 2/3 of a Venom, and the rest of it is just debris. And I got to tell you, I'm actually pretty good at debris. You can put it at any angle with any amount of lines and any amount of cracks, and nobody's going to tell you that stuff shouldn't break that way, right? So the stuff that's way harder is when you do buildings where you actually have to have your perspectives right, and you do a car and people know what a car looks like. So when you get into bushes and smoke and ray gun blast and debris, all of that went super fast. Because there's nobody's going to tell you it's wrong. And then if you did monsters, nobody will ever tell you that the warts on a monster are not right because they have nothing to reference it to. Every wart on every monster is accurate because there's no picture to tell you that it's not right. But if you try to draw a picture of your mom and you don't get it right, people go, that's not what her eyes look like. They actually have a reference point. So I did a lot of drawings that, like I said, people went, wow, look at your drawing, Todd. But it was stuff that I could get right first time, every time. I never had to redraw any of that stuff. Buildings, if I felt like a building was off a little bit, I had to come back and fix it. Anatomy, sometimes I had to fix it. A person's face, I had to fix it. But I tried to, in some cases, add a lot of stuff that I knew, again, I could do quickly, would be 100% bulletproof, and I could meet my deadline again.
You mentioned Image. Forgive me, I didn't get to this part in the book, but when the 7 of you, the biggest names in comics, decided to leave, could you just tell us about the thought process and maybe how you told your family you wouldn't take this big risk?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I think it would be an interesting book someday because I think all 7 of us would probably give you a different story as to what motivated you. So I'll give you my motivation. I was sort of at the end of my, sort of putting up with those odd conversations about why Spider-Man was so popular. Stop being so popular, Todd. It was these bizarre conversations. We're not going to advertise it because you're too popular, Todd. It was like I go, oh, okay. And then we had the one page I think that's in there that I don't think anybody's ever seen, actually, the unedited version that was basically the page, the straw that broke the camel's back. And so they've just been slowly wearing me out. And then I also was going to have my first daughter, my first child.
Wow.
And I'd never been a dad before, so I didn't know what that was going to entail. So I was at a position where, I'd had a pretty good life and I had money in the bank and I didn't feel a need that I had to keep grinding it day in and day out if I didn't want to. Some of my Image partners, thought if they quit for like 10 minutes that everybody would forget them. And I went, well, now in hindsight, I did it twice. There was a break between me going from Amazing Spider-Man to the regular Spider-Man book, and that set a record. And then I left the regular Spider-Man book I did, and then I went to Spawn, and that set an independent record. So, my two stops didn't hurt my momentum. If anything, it made people sort of clamor for it a little bit more. But like I said, I just got to the point where I go, look, I just want to write and draw the stories that I want to come up with, without somebody saying, oh, we can't do that because of precedents or because of some guidelines or rules or some corporate thing. And I understand that. Now, as a guy who runs my own business, I get it. They have their rule book, and I had to adhere to it, and I did that for a while. But I just got to the point where I wasn't willing to do it. Some people can do it for 20 years. Some people can do it for 2 days. For me, obviously, it looked like I had 5 or 6 years in me, and then I just got to go off on my own and do it. And that was it. I just wanted to do art the way that I saw in my brain, and I didn't want to ask for permission as to whether it was, okay to do it this way. Because again, even that Spider-Man story that you're talking about with Wolverine and Wendigo, we had these odd conversations where it was like, because there's a pedophile in that story. That whole story is about a pedophile, right?
I remember, very groundbreaking at the time.
Right. So it was, again, we just go, it's about the monster's killing the kid, and it was like, no. Sadly, the reality is that we as humans are capable of being monsters ourselves, right? Just read the headlines. So that was it. We blamed it on the monster instead of going, no, it was actually one of us. And I thought it was an okay story. I'm biased, obviously. But, I remember that was another one where they went, Todd, you can't have stories like, And so, we got to temper this stuff down. You're getting crazy on us. And I'm like, could I write the same tried and true standard Spider-Man story? Yes. So I just go, I'm done. I just want to go off and do my own book. And then that way, if I come up with a story like that, then I can do whatever I want. And I think by issue 5 of Spawn, it was I think a very important issue where he kills this character called Billy Kincaid, who's the child molester. And it was just, Batman couldn't do that, and Superman couldn't do that, and Spider-Man couldn't do that. So I could never write that story. But Spawn just went, no more. I will not allow you to harm any more children ever again. You're done. And he just ended the conversation very quickly. Just go, good. There's a dead Billy. There's no more kids that will be harmed. Is that a vigilante? Yes. Is it abiding by the laws of our land? No. But did it tell you that the character of Spawn was different than Superman and Batman and Spider-Man? Yes. And that was why that story was important, to say he's not like those three guys. He's a different character.
How hard was it to hold on to Spawn all these years and not use him at Marvel?
Pardon me?
How hard was it to hold on to Spawn until you went out on your own? Because you had him in the back of your head for a long, long time, right?
Yeah, I created him when I was in high school.
Huh? Yeah, so
it wasn't hard. I mean, again, I created all these characters when I was, 16, 17, 18. I put them in my portfolio. I was fortunate enough to get a job with Marvel, and then I bounced between Marvel and DC for a few years, and so I mean, when I got to Marvel and DC, this is maybe weird. I never thought for 1 second to take any of my characters out of my portfolio, and it wasn't out of resistance. It was because there were so many characters that Marvel and DC had that I went, I get to draw that guy, cool. I get to go do that guy, cool. So I at no point did I ever go, I thought my characters I created in high school were cooler than their characters. I was like, oh my gosh, someday I'll get to do the Shocker. That'd be cool, or the Vulture. That'd be cool. So the Penguin, it'd be cool. So it was just it, and there was no reason for me ever to pull my amateur characters out of my bag, if you will. So, but when I left Marvel, and we helped found Image Comics, then we each had to come up with our own character. And I went, hey, you know what? When I was younger, I came up with this character Spawn that I was fond of, and I started doing the comic book of him. And I'm just going to pull him out and put him in modern day, and let's just rock and roll and see what happens. And we're now up to issue 225.
The rest is history.
Well, hopefully I got 225 more.
Yeah, that's the one thing I remember about Spawn the most, especially growing up, is that it was one of those rare books where it had great cover art and there wasn't any drop off from the cover art when you went to the interiors. You see that a lot in Marvel. The covers are gorgeous, and you look inside, and it's drawn by a 12-year-old, and you're like, what?
Yeah. No, I hated those books, too. I got suckered into a lot of those books, too, when I was collecting. For the most part, I was doing the covers to my own artwork. So just like Spider-Man, it was like what you saw on the outside was what you're going to get on the inside. And then later on, I had the good fortune of having Greg Capullo come on. And Greg, although he wasn't, as refined when he first came on as he was when he sort of left, he did spectacular stuff. I mean, Greg was 5 times the artist that I'll ever be. I mean, and I'm so happy that he's getting his notoriety, on Batman right now, because he sort of lived under my shadow for a long time, but he drew circles around me. He was spectacular. I mean, he was. And he did some covers that to me you can just look at and just go, we should just make a poster of that one and that one and that one and that one and that one. So, and then you open up the page and it was like, the inside looked exactly the same. Why? Because it was Greg and I, and then later on it was Greg and Danny Mickey, who's an outstanding inker. You just go, okay. I'm sort of proud that really for the most part between issues 1 and 100, it was kind of only 2 of us, right? It was like me and Greg, and then most of the inking was done by me or Danny Mickey. I mean, I think there was the odd issue that's not true, but out of 100, it was kind of like only 2 or 3 of us. Danny Mickey, myself, and Greg Capullo did the vast majority of that. And you don't sort of see that in comic books anymore, where guys just want to stay on books, right? I mean, the new kid I have on the book, Szymon Kudranski, from Poland, he just finished his 30th issue with me, and he's just getting warmed up, and he's like, 20 more, and I'm tied with, Angel Medina, because again, after Greg left, and then remember, Angel Medina came on for almost 50 issues, right? So we were almost up to issue 150 of Spawn, and there has really only been 3 artists on it, pencilers. Me, Greg, and Angel, and I was always quite proud of that. So that because I always got frustrated when I was collecting that you buy over the course of 3 years, 36 issues of a title, and there might be 8 different artists, and I go, I got 10 years worth, and there's only 3 of us. So
yeah, I appreciate that. And they all have that. They don't seem to drop off in that level of excellence that you expect from a Spawn book as far as the artwork is concerned. They're all great. So.
Well, there's something to be said for anybody listening who wants to break into comic books. There's something to be said about consistency. And so you don't have to be the best artist on the block, but if you're consistent day in and day out, there's a job for you. There was a guy who worked at Marvel named Alex Saviuk. Wasn't the sexiest artist that was out there, but he was steady. And at DC Comic Books, his counterpart was a guy named Jose Delbo. Again, wasn't the sexiest artist, wasn't going to win awards, but he was just steady Eddie, and you could count on him month in and month out. And now with things like trade paperbacks being popular, there's something to be said. Like Szymon, who's on our book and been on our book now for he just finished his 30th issue. We do a trade paperback, and now you go, okay, we're going to put 12 issues in it or something like that. Okay, so that's going to be like 250 pages. The thing that I'm proud of in that is that if you buy that trade paperback, all 250 pages are going to be written by me, and all the artwork are going to look like Szymon. Now, you can decide whether you like his artwork or not. We'll leave that to the consumer. But if you enjoy his artwork, every single page is going to be his. There's not going to be these stops and these starts of the look, because those can be frustrating, because I was a collector myself. A lot of decisions I make were based upon what frustrated me as a collector. And one of the things that frustrated me was, like you're saying, putting covers on it and the artwork didn't match on the inside, having teams rotate so often, and then even things like renumbering books and stuff like that. So I don't do any of that. I just go, no. It bugged me, so why would I do something that always bugged me? I'm not going to do it to the to the people that are out there, because I'd like them to be able to have a book that they go, oh, here's the issue 201 to 250, and that every issue is written by myself and drawn by Shimon. And you go, it's like reading a movie, because you're never going to get a different look. It's going to be the same look for all 500 pages at that point. You're just going to go, oh, cool, that's kind of cool, that's kind of cool. And you get a sense of consistency. Because I remember having this odd feeling where Brian Bendis and Alex Maleev, who had done some work for me on Sam and Twitch, and they took that style and went over to Daredevil. They were doing Daredevil, right? And I thought it was awesome. And then there was one issue, I think it was 300 or something, it was some anniversary issue, and they had 5 different artists or something in the book, in the anniversary book, because it was extra size. And even though I knew that Brian Bendis wrote that issue, it didn't seem like it to me, because the artists were so different from Alex Maleev's style that I was reading the balloons differently. This may sound bizarre, but I was reading the balloons differently in my head, trying to make it fit the artwork, even though it was Brian Bendis that wrote all of it. So instead of just having the same voice that I have in my head, but it became very clear that what was the voice in my head when it was Brian was that Maleev was attached to him, and there was a certain look to it, and I could get into that groove. And as soon as they broke the magic by bringing on somebody else, even though they might have been better, some people thought they might have been better than Alex or worse. That wasn't relevant. They just broke the consistency. They broke the consistency of they were on a groove and you broke it. So I like long runs by the same creative team. I think they're awesome. So I am a big giant fan of like Tomb of Dracula when I was younger, because it was you could count on it. It was bi-monthly, so it was frustrating, but it was Marv Wolfman writing it. It was Gene Colan was penciling it. It was Tom Palmer was inking it. John Costanza was doing the lettering. So even the lettering was consistent, which is why I still have Tom Orzechowski is now the guy who lettered issue 1 is still my letterer 225 issues later on Spawn. And I think Glennis Lynn, whoever was Petra Goldberg was coloring it, and she was on it for a long time. It was like literally the same 5 people every issue on Tomb of Dracula, and it was awesome. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't understand or seem to realize the consistency in Spawn. I mean, I don't think a lot of people even realize that you've been writing it this whole time. People think that you stopped drawing it, so you stopped working on it at all. And I think Ed has a question regarding that, actually, you writing Spawn.
Yeah, there was a story earlier this year about Will Carlton being a pseudonym or something. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. No, what happened was you get these silly arguments from people, and I got thick skin a long time ago, but sometimes I just like to be sort of goofy. And they're going, you need a new writer on the reason the book isn't good, Todd, is you need a new writer on the book, a new writer. So I go, okay, I'll give you a new writer. I got a new writer, this kid named Will Carlton, right? And so Will Carlton comes on, who nobody at that point knows is me. I become Will Carlton, right? I just changed my name, right? And then I get these letters going, finally, you got a new writer. This is what you needed. This is the breath of fresh air we've been waiting for. The stories read so much better, and it was still me. so it was I was just trying to prove a point. That's just sort of silly criticism sometimes. That people just sort of go, Todd's not a writer, and they want to sit there and go, he's an artist, he's not a writer. You know what? I know a lot of people like my artwork, but I've been writing enough now that I think I'm a pretty solid writer, and there's a lot of stories I'm quite proud of. I'm not a novice writer any longer like I was when I first started on Spider-Man. I think that there's some interesting stuff there. So I go, okay. But then eventually I go, okay, they want to do some interviews with Will Carlton. I couldn't deliver him, so I go, I'll have to come back. And it was also, I think there's a little bit then, you got the other critics that said, you got to get a new writer going. How come Todd doesn't pay attention to his books anymore? He doesn't care about his books anymore. I'm like, yeah, I can't win. So I go, dudes, since issue 185, when the new Spawn came in, the Jim Downey character came in, I go, that's been me. That's 15 and 25. That's been 40 issues. I've been writing the last 40 issues. So if you don't like it, then you got nobody to blame but me. It's me. It's my fault. But if you happen to like any of it, that was also me. So there's no passing the buck. You know, I think Brian Holgren helped a little bit at the beginning of that run there, but you know, I was the one that was driving it for the most part.
When I read that, I thought it was funny. The whole secret identity, Todd McFarlane. I just thought it was funny. I didn't know if it was true or not. Thanks for clearing that up. It's hilarious.
Yeah. It's Todd. Yeah. If you see any trade paperbacks coming out, it's going to say Todd McFarlane. We're going to scrub Will Carlton off it.
Yeah, you should have just kept that alter ego going. Just dress like a hippie for a convention like Jim Carrey did once for the MTV Movie Awards. Just play off of that. See what the fans think.
Yeah. See. So anyway, I just like to just be persnickety every now and then.
Back to your art book. It's not just drawings from throughout your career. You actually have some things here regarding the Spawn TV show that was on HBO, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the things you know, is we wanted to put in there was, again, I didn't want it to just be a sort of a comic book artist book. Although there's plenty of that in there, you know, I put in 20 years now, and you know, we've done things in other areas, and so I wanted to. As I mentioned to you earlier in this interview, you know, people should be looking at the early pages to get inspiration, to go, hey, Todd wasn't very good and he got a job. Yeah, but the end of the book should be, wow, he broke in as a penciler in comic books, and somehow in some weird journey, he's now doing TV and movies and directing stuff and video games and toys and goofy stuff. And all of that just because he sent in some comic book samples. So, again, the possibilities are limitless to some degree once you get your foot in the door. Who knows where your life's going to go? I didn't know. I had no idea that when they gave me my first comic book job, I'd be doing anything that I do today. You know, it wasn't any of my goals. I just wanted to draw the first 10 pages they gave me. So the end of the book, I'm hoping, again, is to say, and this is where your art can take you. It can take you into a lot of different fields.
Right. You even include some samples of video games featuring Spawn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see the cover artwork for like Super Nintendo and PlayStation and everything. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, again, we've been lucky that we've been able to dabble in, you know, pop culture, right? TV,
right.
Movies, music, toys, video games. You know, I mean, we've been very fortunate.
Can you talk about toys a little bit? How are your toys consistently the best in the industry? Is it your attention to detail, or what is it about that?
You know what? It's interesting because when we first broke into the business, I thought there was a lot of toys. There were a lot of toys out there that I thought that were very bland, and I thought we could do a better job of it. Not too many toys were being made that I was jealous of. You know, fast forward now 20 years, that, you know, I think we do, you know, we still have the best toys out there, but there's still a lot of toys now that come out that I go, wow, that's good, right? So
yeah.
I always thought that if I could help sort of set a little bit of a pathway to sort of going, you know, we don't have to do these boring, silly, you know, goofy toys, that it would just, you know, there'd be others that would be just as skilled and talented that would come along and be able to take something out of the playbook. So, and the winner would be the consumer, because they get better toys, and I believe that's come true. That from the time, you know, toys were being made and we started our company to today, I think there's a lot of cool toys now you can get. And I'd like to think that our company had some impetus in sort of raising the bar artistically. But one of the ways that we got to where we got to is traditionally, for people who don't know, the big Fortune 500 companies, they give like a drawing to one sculptor, and he has to do the entire figure. Now, going back to my comments that I'd made about being a comic book artist, we've got to be able to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
You know, the sculptors sort of have to be able to do the same thing. And as an artist, obviously myself, I understand I'm not equally skilled at everything. I think I draw monsters better than I draw anatomy. I think I draw explosions better than I draw buildings. So I know where my weaknesses are at. And so if you give that drawing to one sculptor, then you're going to get all his skills, both pro and con, and it's going to be in the final product. But we did it more like a conveyor belt where I go, hold a sec, who's my best detailer of weapons, you know? And I had guys that all they did was weapons. And I go, fine. So why make the same guy do the weapons when I can have that guy who's good at the anatomy just stick with anatomy? And somebody else was good at hair. I had people that all they did was hair. And I go, man, look at that, it looks cool. And then somebody else was good at like texture and warts and clothing and wrinkles. I had guys that were great at wrinkles. And so, you know, by the time it was all done, it was, you know, half a dozen, 6, 7, 8 people that were working on each one of the sculpts to get to the final product. And that's not a system that the big companies use.
It's crazy when those things first came out. I remember nobody was used to that kind of detail in toys. It was just unreal.
Yeah, and I don't know why. I don't know. I mean, it's just clay. You're just putting clay in a shape. I was as surprised as anybody else. You know, I've been very fortunate in my life. Let me just say, gentlemen, very fortunate in my life that I've gotten a lot of praise and won awards for doing what I thought was obvious stuff. It's like, Todd, how did you make that chainmail look like chainmail? I looked it up in a book to see what it looked like, and we just made it look like chainmail. I mean, I don't know. It's sort of a bizarre question, you know. We do a lot of sports figures, right? And people always say, we've won lots of awards, and they go, oh, how do you make them look so realistic, right? And my answer is always the same. We use this high tech. I don't know if some of you guys probably haven't heard about it, but you know, maybe, I don't know. Ask your mom. It's called a camera. And if you take this camera and you point it towards people, it actually takes a photo of reality. The question should not be, how did you take a picture of Brett Favre and make it look like Brett Favre? The question should have been, how did they take a picture of Brett Favre and not make it look like Brett Favre? That, to me, is the more bizarro question. So I'm winning awards because, get this, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to give an award to Todd because he actually made it look like the way it's supposed to look. Okay, I'm a genius. I'm now a genius because I make it look like what it's supposed to look like. Wow, God bless those other guys for making me look so good, right? I mean, I always ask people, you want to look smart? Hang around a bunch of dumb people. So I go, the question shouldn't be, how did I make it look realistic? The question should be, how did they not for 50 years? That should have been the bigger question. But I take the award and smile, and I walk out of the room with a free meal.
Well, yeah, I guess before then, toys were almost like for kids, so maybe kids aren't that discriminating. But when you came out, it was like you aimed it toward a more mature consumer.
Yeah,
and
right.
They're gonna pay this money. They're gonna want Spider-Man to look like your Spider-Man or your Spawn. When you started copying those comic covers, those are my favorite Spawn toys. Those toys are awesome. I got the comic and the toy.
No, you hit it right. You hit it right on the nose. That when you do something that's going to be for a 7-year-old, 7-year-old's not discriminating with his artwork, and usually he doesn't even buy the toy. Mom buys it for him. And Mom, she's even less discriminating, right? All the kid says is, Mom, I want a Hulk toy. And she just goes down the aisle until she sees the big Hulk logo. And she goes, oh, there's the Hulk. And she puts it in the cart. She doesn't care whether it's the right color green, whether it looks like him, whether he's got moving parts. She just goes, my boy said, bring me a Hulk. I'm bringing him a Hulk. I've done my motherly duties. I'm done. But the people we were selling to, you're absolutely right. They were spending their own money. Their whole, they were 15 and above, and their discrimination was way harder. So I knew I couldn't cheat them. If they wanted the Predator, or the Aliens, or the Peyton Manning, or Shrek, or whatever it was we did, whatever goofy stuff we did, Matrix. They had a reference point. They knew what Matrix looked like, so it better damn well look like Matrix then, because otherwise they would have walked away from me. So,
yeah. I remember because you were like the rock star of Image for so long, and Spawn was the flagship title for Image. As time went on, people started to criticize you for not having more variety of titles at Todd McFarlane Productions or Todd McFarlane Entertainment. But now, you've launched Haunt, and I had a chance to talk to interview Nathan about that, since he's the one drawing Haunt. how did that come about? When did you decide you needed something else in besides just Spawn?
Well, to go back to your point, that was Robert Kirkman challenging me at a convention one time, going, "Hey, how come all you do is Spawn, right? You need to do more." And he was this little fat kid in the stands, and I didn't know who he was, and then I'm talking to him, and he challenging me, and then somebody up on the panel said, "Todd, that's Robert Kirkman," and we'd been doing his Walking Dead, and I'm like, I know who Robert Kirkman is, but I'd never seen a photo of the dude, so I'm like, okay, sorry, Robert, but in a weird way, we're doing Walking Dead. I'm your boss. Why are you talking to me like that? But I go, okay, you want me to do something new? Then help me with it, right? So, but here's what I've said to people, and it's sort of weird. If you can create Mickey Mouse or Superman or Batman, and you can make a kind of a good living if you just come up with one of those ideas, right? I mean, somebody said, yeah, I'm going to create McDonald's. I'm going to sell burgers and fries. I mean, it was like they didn't sit there and go, now how do I sell tacos? And how do I do spaghetti? So I think it's a misnomer when people say that, that Microsoft said we're going to be in the software business. That you just go, it's okay to have like one really big idea and just hold on to it nice and tight. And don't get distracted. Some of my other buddies at Image started studios, and I think they got distracted by trying to create 100 characters, right? I mean, if you look at what they did, they created 100 characters. Did any of them become breakout characters and or, the character they created 3 years later from the breakout character, did that one become the new one? No, not really. I don't get it. I mean, if somebody says, here's the trademark to Mickey Mouse, or here's the trademark to Superman. You do not stand there and go, well, that's all? People are going to get bored of it. But then I have Batman also. No. Somebody give you a trademark to Superman, you take it, you say thank you, and you run out of that room as fast as you can before they change their mind. So I understand everybody wanting me to do more characters because I take it, in a weird way, I take it as a backhanded compliment. They want me to do more stuff because they like my stuff, right? So it's, because if they didn't, they would be going, I don't care what you do. You can create 100 characters, and I'm not buying any of it. Which is different than why don't you do more? Because I want more variety from you. But I got a pretty decent life. I don't like to complicate it. Spawn's been good to me. I mean, Spawn led into me starting a toy company that now leads me into doing Matrix and sports toys. So I mean, I've done a variety of stuff. It might not be a variety of characters in comic book form, but it doesn't mean that I don't do a variety of stuff. I do a lot of different things.
Right, you've designed a bunch of you designed the toys, so those interesting new character designs, even though they're not comic books, they are yours. You are working. Right. You are creating new stuff. Right. And Han, you designed Han, right? The look of Han.
Yeah. Robert Kirkman came over to the place and we sat down and banged it out. Yeah.
Yeah, and how's that been doing? Are you happy with the way it's been going so far?
I've always got that brain on that's going, if I was writing it, here's what I would do. So, and I told Joe, Casey, and Robert, the only part that bugs me out of all this stuff, and I'll eventually get there, is that I go, the name is Haunt, and I go, there hasn't been one single moment yet, where he's actually scared me, and it just seems like if a guy's going to have the name Haunt, and if you ask people, give me a word association, Haunt, what are you going to say? They're going to give you creepy words back. That there hasn't been that one moment where I just go, whoa, this guy might be almost psychotic and creepy and scary. I haven't gotten that yet, So I've gotten, some nice action stuff and some, interesting odd stuff from Joe, but I haven't gotten, I said to both of them before, scare me. I'd like to have just one issue where you scare me, and I haven't gotten it yet, so maybe I'll just have to write it. I'll have to write it myself.
You want something done right, you got to do it yourself, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm not. Again, to be clear, I'm not even saying that it's right. I'm just, again, just because that's what I want doesn't mean that it's better than anybody else or it's right. It just means that's just the flavor that I like,
Right.
Other people who want action adventure stuff, they go, no. I mean, if you don't want sort of urban superhero, sort of reality-based stuff, the Spawn comic book isn't your cup of tea. But if you want something that is, you go, it looks like the world and it feels real, and then there's this sort of one odd guy in this book here called Spawn. I mean, if that's something that's interesting to you, I think Spawn's a hell of a read for you. So which is different than a lot of espionage and government stuff and the netherworld and stuff like that that's going on in Haunt. So to each his own, right? There's dramas, there's comedies, there's action movies, there's children's movies, there's family movies. I mean, there's a wide variety of genres, mediums that we can go into and to tell stories. If you like comedies, doesn't necessarily mean you like dramas. Okay, I'm a drama guy. I've always been a R-rated drama guy. That not action movie, big fantastic stuff. Just I'm an R-rated drama guy ever since I was 10 years old. And probably, a bunch of what I do reflects that. Yeah. So, I don't, have I seen the Avengers movie? Nope. Have I seen the latest Spider-Man movie? No. Will I get to them eventually? Yeah, sure. I got a 12-year-old boy, so eventually we'll sit down and watch them. But do I run out and see them? No. But did I take my wife to go see Argo? Yeah. Because I'm going, cool, R-rated drama, it's cool. And, by the way, it's based on, semblance of what happened in the real world. That's awesome. That's awesome.
What's your take on Walking Dead, the show? Do you watch that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, my kids love it. I watch it, again, I've read the book, so I kind of know what's happening. So I'm like, all the surprises. I'm going, seeing it. I know what's happening next. But I think they're doing a terrific job on it, and obviously they've made it. It's a huge compliment to Robert that he came up with a comic book, which is just storytelling, words and pictures. That's all comics are, words and pictures. You can put any story you want in it. It doesn't have to be spandex. That he was able to come up with an idea that is kind of universal, right? Survival of the fittest in a place, and he's made the most important thing be the characters, not the monsters or the zombies. They're just a backdrop to basically go, what would happen if me and my family were starving and you and your family were starving and there's only 1 gallon of water. Who gets it? Who gets it? Is it the big guy? Is it the smart guy? Is it the guy with the gun? How do you get there? How do you decide who's getting that gallon of water, given that everybody's starving and everybody's thirsty? So those are way cooler and more interesting to me, which is why I like drama, R-rated drama movies. Is that you tackle those kinds of issues. The human id, the most interesting thing in the world is the human id to me, and it's an endless bounty of storylines.
Yeah, I like how Kirkman seems to have stuck to that golden rule that Stephen King lives by for his horror stories. It's not about the monsters that you're dealing with. It's the more dangerous thing is the people around you and how they react to being in such a stressful life and death situation. Are they going to throw you to the wolves to save themselves, or are they going to stand by your side?
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, again, when I was a kid, there was a movie called Jaws, and it's like, shark didn't talk a lot, right? So, so the movie was basically about the people, right? Not about the shark. I mean, the shark obviously was a catalyst, but it was just, what motivates people in certain situations. So,
I'm sorry, Ed, but if we're ever stuck out there in a boat and the shark comes, I'm feeding you to the shark. And I know if he's full, I can swim away to shore. So
I don't go on boats, brother. I don't go on boats. Todd, can I get your take on the industry right now? Comic books in general. How do you feel it's going right now?
Obviously, we hit a big peak in the early '90s, which is sort of when X-Men was kicking butt, and the Spider-Man book came out, and then Image formed, and everybody was riding high, and sadly, we've figured out ways to diminish that crowd. Which is interesting in spite of all the success of all the movies that have happened in the last decade, right? The X-Men and the Fantastic Four and obviously the Spider-Man franchise and all those movies. Now with Avengers carrying on the tradition. But I don't know. We figured out how how to get people to stop being addicted to our product, you know, and the one thing that you need in comic books and you want in any sort of business where you're trying to sell product is you like habitual buyers, right? You need them to keep coming back, and you need them to just keep coming back and back and back. And we figured out a little bit, as a matter of fact, a lot of it, of how to get people to get away from those addictions. And I think part of it was, you know, the price of the books started going up, so they started getting expensive. I think that the renumbering of books, I think all of that is short term. I think you get an initial spike, but then it always goes back to where it was before, and then actually goes lower than it was before. And so we've lost continuity. And because I know as a guy who collected comic books, you know, I collected a lot of titles, and I would collect them even if I didn't like them. I'd collect it because I had the last 45 issues. I just go, I'm addicted. I got to keep buying it. But the moment they said they were going to stop that title and they were going to renumber it, I go, you know, I never did like it, and they're going to keep some of the same people. I'm like, I'm done. And they gave me a chance to jump off the train, and I think it hasn't served us well. And then, you know, you also have a bunch of people that were running stores that were, you know, they weren't trained in business. What they were, a lot of them were fans who decided to take their hobby and turn it into an occupation. But I don't think they were trained in sort of true business acumen, and you know, a bunch of them didn't learn it. So we went from about 7,500 stores to, you know, about 1,000 now. We lost. The reason the sales are down because we lost, you know, 80% of the stores. So of course the sales are going to go down 80% because we lost 80% of stores. Mm-hmm. And so the guys who figured it out are the stores that are thriving now and doing a decent job. But unless we get, you know, 2,000 more like them, then, you know, I don't think sales on comic books are ever going to be anywhere near what they were before. So, you know, we went from a point when you could sell close to 1 million if you had a hot book out of the gate. You know, steady sales. Spawn was at 500,000 for a long time, steady for a long time. To now, you barely, some months you barely even get one book that can crack 100,000. You know, so shame on us for figuring out how to scare the consumer away.
Mr. McFarlane, thank you for stopping by. It was a real pleasure talking to you. I hope anyone who's listening to this will pick up your art book. It's really fantastic to read. It's actually more entertaining than I thought it would be because it's not just static images and it's not a straight-up biography. It combines both very well. It's The Art of Todd McFarlane, The Devil's in the Details. I'm sure you can find it on Amazon.com or mycomicshop.com, and it's, you know, it's worth picking up for anybody that loves comic books, and especially for fans of your work. So thank you for coming by.
You bet. I think it comes out at the end of the month in the comic shops, and then the first week of December in the bookstores. So
just in time for Christmas.
This is time for Christmas. 400 plus pages. 400 plus pages. There's lots of pages in there. So it turned out pretty well. Then my production people were quite proud of themselves because they worked on it very, very long. You know, for me, you know, it's an odd one that I look at the book and I go, it's 20 years of my life condensed into 1 inch. My life is now 1 inch thick, I guess, my career. It's sort of humbling that it takes you 20 years to get 1 inch of thickness. You know, I go, wow, so I got to do another 20 years to be 2 inches thick, you know, so. And everything in the book, I know, there's no surprises because I lived with me every day of my life. So I'm probably the most bored of myself out of anybody. I'm like, oh, Todd. Now you're going to talk about yourself again. Here we go. Come on, Todd. You know this. Come on. This is so boring. You know, but I'm very, very fortunate and glad that I've had the support of so many people over the years that have come back to buy the product because it's entitled me literally to put food on my family's table and allow me to continue to be an artist. And that was sort of what's in my DNA. Just being an artist, and most people, you know, they're not given that luxury, and I've been given a huge luxury in my life, and so that's why when I go to conventions, every person I give a signature to, I thank them because they've they've allowed me to continue being an artist every day. So
I appreciate how candid you've been. I was afraid, being the rock star that you've been perceived as being by all the fan base, we wouldn't be able to get you to open up. But I admire the fact you were very open about everything. And you actually beat the time limit I have on my record app twice, 45 minutes. We're almost out of time on the second one, actually. Yeah.
Well, to go back to your last point, I'm a Canadian kid, and we're very thankful for just having our 15 minutes of fame. My 15 minutes of fame has lasted way longer than I ever anticipated. So every second it goes longer than that, I just go okay, and I'm always thinking tomorrow's the end of it. So I'm okay. Like I said, I've had plenty of good days in my life, and it's time maybe for another young kid, maybe somebody listening to your show, to come along and be the next one to basically sort of set the world on fire and go, and I'll be cheering them on the sidelines, all the way along. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, go ahead, Ed. Go ahead.
No, I just want to thank him again. That's it. If he had anything else to mention, anything coming up last minute that he forgot or he wanted to bring up, anything else in the works or anything?
Yeah, again, we get rid of the toys. Obviously, The Walking Dead. We just picked up a couple of licenses we haven't announced yet for some new toys. Another incident.
No, actually, you did just beat that time limit on this record app. I had to reload it right now. If anyone's listening, that's Blue Square Group's Record Phone Calls app. It's a really great app for recording conversations. If you think your wife's cheating, you want to get her on the phone to get some conversations on it, that's great. You want to record conversations with great creators, that's great too. But remember, there's a 45-minute limit, so be ready for that. Sorry for that.
You know what? Hey, can you do me a favor? You guys been in contact with Jen to set up this interview?
Yes.
Send her the name of that app, because coincidentally my wife had to do something the other day, and she needed to borrow my phone because she didn't have a recorder on her phone, and so maybe I can get this on her phone, and because she's been borrowing my phone. I don't have my phone today because she's transcribing something today. So.
Oh, sure, yeah. It's I'll send her the email. It's only $10 to purchase. And what they do is the conversation is recorded on a private, secure server, and then they send you an email of the file. And all you do is you double-click on the file so you can change the name on it, so you can put whatever name you want, like conversation with my husband. But at the end, make sure you put in .mp3, so that way you can listen to it on any kind of software like iTunes. I listen to it on iTunes afterward, so I can make sure it's recorded properly. So that's all you have to do. It's very easy to use. It's very useful. The only thing I don't like is the time limit, but, And every time I do this, I never think we're going to have a creator on long enough to talk about it, but I'm very humble that, you want to say so much about your great career, and that Matt Hawkins was the same way, because we're just fans, and we love talking to people that have done the things that we just dream about.
Well, I'm only an expert on a couple of things. One of them is me.
The expert on that.
That's why I'm going. If you want me to talk about Jim Lee, I go. Eventually, I go. Just talk to Jim. He's probably got better answers than me.
It's funny that you mentioned Jim. He kind of disappeared for a while, and then he did Batman Hush, which was a big deal. But the problem with that was not only the problem, but after that came out, everyone started to ask, when is Todd McFarlane going to do his run like that? Spider-Man Hush, something like that. So this is just Todd doing a monthly book. Would you ever consider that?
A Marvel book?
Yeah, Spider-Man. Like Jim Lee did Batman. You do Spider-Man for 12 issues.
Yeah. No.
No. Well, maybe we can get you back on Spawn. That'll that fanboy.
No. I explain it to people this way, and again, I enjoyed my time at Marvel and DC. Okay. I had great friends and relationships, and I got to draw some great characters, and it helped inspire my career, and it was a great moment in my life. But it's in my past, and it's no different than if you ask me about high school. Did I enjoy high school? Yeah, I enjoyed high school. Did I have good friends? Yeah. Todd, are you ever going to go back to high school? No. So to me, why? Because high school is in my past. My life is forward looking, and I go. So I had a good time, learned a lot of good things, but Marvel and DC are in the rearview mirror now. It's not in front of me. It's behind me. So it doesn't mean I'm not here to say that they're a bad company. Don't work for them. Quite the opposite. I think everybody should go and work for them. I'm just saying. But for me, I have no aspirations to ever do that. I'm having too much fun just doing my own stuff right now. So
that actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, wow. To put in that perspective, going back to high school, what are you, a vampire from Twilight? Yeah, you know.
Right. And again, that doesn't mean that you begrudge your teacher, your school,
no,
your
not
class.
at all. No, yeah.
It just means, the fond memories of yesterday, the fond memories. I enjoyed, and when I look in that book and I go, wow, look at all that hard work I did on Spider-Man. Obviously I must have been younger, because if I was today drawing Spider-Man, I don't think I'd be nearly as enthusiastic to come up with those crazy ways of drawing him. So I go, okay, and I'm proud of my time that I did back then. But like I said, it was a different time in my life, and I got other things. I got a family, I got my businesses. So I keep myself busy. I coach baseball. We just won. Yesterday we won our league, first place.
Nice.
Our baseball team. My son's 13, so I manage his baseball team. So dad goes out and spends lots of time with the kid. We got a big tournament this weekend. We got 5 games. So nice. Sometimes there's things that are more important than just hunching over a board and doing work.
I like that you mentioned that. Too many people think, it's just Todd McFarlane, the businessman wearing the dark black suit like you did in the intros for all the HBO episodes of Spawn. But no, you're a family guy. Yeah, rent Spawn. That was actually a really good series. But
I rented that suit. I don't have too many suits.
But yeah, but you're a family guy, and that's you're very down to earth. And speaking with you, you're very personable. And people don't get to see the side of you too much, and I'm glad that whoever listens to this gets to see that side of you.
Yeah, I just so you know, I started dating my wife when she was 13. We dated for 7 years and have been married ever since. So we've been married 27 years in the 7, so it's been almost 35 years, right? So that was when we started going out with each other when she was in junior high. I was in high school, she was in junior high. So we had no idea that any of this would or wouldn't happen to us, and so it's not like I became a rock star and started dating all the blondes, right? So I found my sweetheart young, and then all the rest of this stuff isn't nearly as important as having that lady by my side every day. So she's been there through thick and thin, and as a matter of fact, she thinks that all the success has sort of complicated our life. She'd be more than happy to have the spotlight completely go away and get back to normal life. So we don't care. Like I said, we've had our 15 minutes, and we're thankful for it. But if they took it away from us tomorrow, we'd be completely okay with all of that. We'd be okay. So
yeah, this was a very, very enlightening interview. It was a pleasure talking to you, Mr. McFarlane.
All right, you guys do good.
Thank you so much.
One quick thing. I was a huge fan of Kiss the Cycle Circus you had coming out of your company. Whatever happened to that? Are we ever going to get that back?
No, we ended up after it was done because we had a contract with Gene Simmons and the Kiss, right? We had to negotiate sort of how that would work because it was a weird one that we were doing the artwork, so we don't really own Kiss, but he didn't really own the artwork, so it was this weird sort of limbo thing that's there. So maybe we'll get together and reprint it, which would be sort of the smartest thing to do. But short of that, I can't bring it back without getting another license, and Gene can't reprint stuff that isn't his. So.
Well, thanks again, Mr. McFarlane. It was awesome speaking to you.
All right, you guys be good.
Yeah, you take care. Thank you for all your time.
Bye. Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Oh man.
Anyone listening in? Todd McFarlane, great guy, family guy, not just successful businessman. I know a lot of people have this perception of Todd that he's cold-hearted, that he's just a guy in a suit now and doesn't care about the little people, doesn't care about where he came from. if you've heard this interview, you clearly know that's not true. He's a great guy, and he's got, he's got his everything in perspective. He understands what matters most in life, and comic books and the business is just a part of it. So, this just a really great guy. Despite all the rumors people have about him, he's just a really great guy who happens to be really, really successful.
But he'll never do Spider-Man again, so I'm sad.
Oh, yeah, no Spider-Man, hush. That's sad.
Spawn movie was good. He said he's working on Spawn movies. That was awesome.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, the actor that had played Spawn originally, he's still, young enough, and he's in great shape. He can play Spawn again. There's no reason why he couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And so, anyone who's listening in, check out Spawn, check out Haunt. That's supposed to be really great. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I'm going to. And check out that art book, The Art of Todd McFarlane, The Devil's in the Details. That's just a great. I love the subtitle to it, The Devil's in the Details. That's great. I like that. And it's a really great book, man. It's just full of awesome drawings. And honestly, for someone who's going to be attending college soon to learn to draw, because it's just, I'm a writer, but I kind of have that passion for it and the desire to want to learn graphic design and maybe some flash animation. I'm going to be learning to draw as well. Todd McFarlane's work on Spider-Man and Spawn are huge inspiration, and it's just going to have a huge influence on my style. So years from now, when I'm able to actually draw comic books, you're going to see a lot of influence from Todd McFarlane, because he's just one of those iconic creators that I grew up reading comic books from.
You're basically just telling everybody you're going to steal his style.
Exactly. I'm going to steal his style, and then just talking to guys who really know how to draw, who work in the industry, they all say the same thing. They originally just ape somebody's style who they're huge fans of, and then once they just understand anatomy and proper sequential storytelling, their own style starts to develop in the course of them learning to do all of that. And eventually you go from for example, Todd really copied a lot of George Perez early on. You can see it in his art book. He goes from looking like he's a George Perez clone to all of a sudden, the lines are different. The perspective is all different, and then eventually he comes up with that style that everyone knows when you look at one drawing. It's Todd McFarlane. It's him.
I liked when he was talking about the secrets of how he hid stuff and made you think stuff. It was almost like we were talking to Mickey Mantle how to hit a fastball. He was giving you a little behind the scenes of how he did stuff. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, actually in the book, he mentions that which made me think of batting average. That no one's perfect. No one's perfect, so you're not going to get everything right. So instead of stopping on that one panel in that one page that you think you need to keep doing over and over and over again, just draw it and move on to the next one. You know what? The next one might come out better. And overall, the quality of the book, even if one drawing or one panel or one page isn't perfect, the overall quality of the book, if you've got the talent, it's going to be great. So I think of it like batting average. You take a swing on one page and you miss, but maybe you hit a home run with the next one. And your overall batting average for that book is going to be so high based on your talent that you're going to get away with having a bad page here or there. No one's going to notice because the rest of the book is so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and, man, that Wendigo page that now you were talking about that, I saw it and I said, oh my God, I can never draw that. All that detail, it's just impossible. How long did it take him? 3 days? And after what he said, I'm starting to dissect it, and Wolverine's head, the smoke from the cigarette in his hand, it completely blocks out Wendigo's entire left leg and both feet. So that's a lot of detail in the feet, especially the claws, that he doesn't have to draw. The fact that Wendigo is hunched over takes out most of his torso, and it's blocked by his left hand, so that takes away a lot of the detail that he would need to put in as well. And putting Wendigo in the middle of the entire page makes it so he doesn't have to draw an entire jungle scene, which would require a lot of detail as well because of all the animals in there, the brush, the trees, the leaves. So he packed those little tricks, make it look like there's so much more detail than there is, and he's absolutely right. Unless you know what you're looking for, you're not going to see it. Your mind is to fill it all in, and you're going to think, wow. He drew everything in there, from head to toe, every little thing in the jungle, and it's just fantastic.
He used the Jedi mind trick.
Yeah, the Jedi mind trick. That's right. yeah.
That's cool.
Let me just apologize to Todd, because years from now I'm totally going to ape his style until I develop my own. I'm just going to be Todd 2.0 until I develop my own style.
That should be good enough.
It's gonna be.
I can't believe talking toys with Todd McFarlane. Oh my god.
Yeah, that was great. That I don't know how the hell he does that. Coming up with reading an interview from Silvestri about how they started Image, and everyone thought that Todd was crazy for getting into toys. I don't know how you can make that work without having a background in toys. That's just crazy. He could pull that off.
Yeah, definitely.
But it was a great interview. But a couple of sad things, like you said. No Spider-Man return for him. No more Kiss the Psycho Circus unless Gene Simmons says it's okay, and that's just sad. I was a big fan of Kiss the Psycho Circus. You ever read that?
No, that's why I didn't say anything. No.
But you know about Kiss, right? The rock band.
Yeah, I know of them. Yeah.
So in the comic book Kiss the Psycho Circus, they're basically following this circus where some of the performers in it are the earthly embodiment of these cosmic gods. And each one of the Kiss band members is some kind of cosmic god from beyond recorded time. Each one presenting something primal about ourselves, right? You have the demon, you have the wild one, and so on. And through it almost feels like an anthology where these different stories are told. Like this criminal comes in and he's judged based on his crimes, and this other one about a samurai that has to prove himself worthy. As he goes from he's on his mission to deliver a message from his master to another, I believe, and through that journey he's tempted by the four Kiss gods to abandon his quest for different reasons, and he chooses not to. These really crazy warped storylines that are going through this kind of anthology, and it was a lot of fun. Like almost everything coming out of Todd McFarlane's publishing company, it's just really beautifully drawn and great lines and detailed inks, and it's a lot of fun to read and a lot of fun to look at. And I miss the fact it's gone. It's one of those books where I wish I could write a story for it, because it's just so cool. Well, so that's something else fans should pick up. Yeah, buy Kiss the Psycho Circus, the trade. What was that?
I said maybe you can. You're going to be drawing like them pretty soon. Maybe you can write the part 2 and see if Kiss wants to put it out.
Right. I'm just going to stalk Todd McFarlane now until I can write a Kiss the Psycho Circus story.
What toys do you think he was talking about?
What?
I said, what toys licenses do you think he was talking about? He said he's working on some new licenses. So he can't mention.
God, he's done everything, hasn't he? I mean, what else is there? A Daniel Craig Bond toy? I mean,
I don't know. There's always something coming out. There's I don't know. I'm trying to think.
He's got the Walking Dead toys coming out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So,
I was going to ask him, but I don't think he felt like saying it yet. But I got to keep my eye open for that. See what that's all about. I know he's doing Halo, but he's been doing Halo for a while.
Yeah. Oh man, I love Halo. I love me some Halo. He's I'm looking at images of the Walking Dead toys now. They kind of have they look a little different. They look posable. They have joints now. I'm not used to that with Todd toys. But I don't know. What other license could there be that he would want to make toys of? What else is there?
I don't know.
I mean, he did Call of Duty toys already, right?
Yeah, he did that. I don't know. He's probably not doing Marvel. That's going to be Hasbro. Maybe more Image stuff?
Maybe. Did he do any Haunt toys yet?
That I do not know.
Yeah,
well, it's a thought. We got to look out for it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe we'll get lucky and he'll have a chance to do us some New York Knicks championship figurines. Right. So, this was, this was great fun, but it's time to, get something to eat. We've been waiting here a little while because we were put on hold for a bit, but, that's Todd McFarlane. If he wants to put us on hold for 24 hours, I'll just sit here like a sniper and I go to the bathroom this way by the phone until he's ready.
Yeah, we'll wait.
Thanks for stopping by again, Ed. It was some great questions as always.
Thank you.
And if anyone wants to send some, words of encouragement to Ed, and send them to Ed-Pool, right, at Twitter.
Yep.
And, just include anything you want to, love letters, hate letters, send them all to Ed.
Nice
Leave me
guy.
out of it. Send it all
Nice
to Ed.
guy. Nice guy.
Crazy naked pictures of fanboys, send them all to Ed. Leave me out of it.
I'm gonna change my Twitter as soon as I can.
Yeah, you
all right.
take care, man. Bye.
See you later.